Welcome to Hourglass Cinema spoiler-free reviews from Victims and Villains, and this is kind of our backdoor pilot to this episode. We're going to be launching a regular series rotation of this in May. Basically, the way that this is going to work is if you go to victimsandvillains.net/reviews, you guys can find a whole slew of written reviews. This is basically going to be a conversational format of the reviews that came out that week, and we are so happy to partner with the Unnamed Film Festival to bring you guys this very first special episode, and I am joined by staff writers and podcasters, Mr. Mark Moore.
Yo.
And Brandon Riff Daddy Miller.
Sup?
I am Captain Nostalgia, and buckle up because things are about to get interesting. So basically the premise of Unnamed Film Festival is it's basically films and shorts that celebrate the found footage documentary horror subgenre. And Mark, how would you say this? Like, is it faux documentaries? Did I say that right?
Faux documentaries, yeah. It's their mock documentaries, so to speak.
Mockumentaries. And so first up, our first one comes from, and Mark, I believe this is probably more your speed, so I will let you take over. Tell us what Dwellers is about.
So Dwellers is a found footage put out, produced by David Ellison's company, one of the members of Megadeth. It's basically a producer supposed to be doing a documentary on the homeless and following the path. We hear some stories of stuff going on in the sewer, and it takes a turn almost similar to Blair Witch kind of found footage.
This movie was painfully hard to watch. I'm just gonna be honest. I found like this film to me kind of feels like they took the premise of the 80s indie darling Chud and were like, we're gonna make this like Blair Witch. And it never reaches that climax that you're anticipating for. The poster kind of gives away the climax. Basically, it's like these people underground. There's a rumor that they are quote-unquote mutants. And I don't know, man. Like this right now sits at my second worst movie of the year. And that is giving grace to Tom and Jerry and Chaos Walking, two of the worst movies I've seen this year. But what were your thoughts on this one?
So it is a lot like Blair Witch. It's like they just kind of took the Blair Witch formula and, okay, we're going into the sewers over top of it. They fail in the aspect, though, they never really build the tension and believability that you had with Blair Witch. And it's like, okay, I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen. They're going here. This is going to happen next. And you kind of know every step of the way what's going to happen before it even does. And it's just because it's so formulaic and predictable, it causes it to fall apart and be just kind of dull and unsuspenseful in any way, shape, or form.
I think out of the very few films that I got to watch out of this festival, you and Brandon definitely got to see more than I did. This one was the one that kind of let me down the most because this one had such promise. Where you, like, very early in the film, they're like, yeah, these weird things, like there's homeless people that are going missing, and like as you're investigating into this, you're expecting some weird stuff to happen, and I think like the weirdness they save for like the last like 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. Like, it is just a boring crawl walking up to those last few minutes.
Yeah, it's nothing really happens. It's a handful of people wandering around in the dark trying to act surprised. And My big thing with the movie was it was tied to Megadeth, and they keep mentioning Ellefson off and on the whole movie. They show him in one or two scenes, but and that was my curiosity. What kind of movie is he putting out from his production studio that I didn't even know existed? And it was generic in every aspect, and it did nothing for the found footage series. It was actually almost a step backwards due to lack of really anything to expect out of it.
I think for me, the part of the movie that, and this will be the last thing I say before we kind of give our scores, is the fact that there is just like nothing redeemable here. And I think that the whole entire found footage aspect of this gets lost upon and just confused by its own voice, because you have this subplot where it's a story within a story. So you have one of the crew that survived this quote-unquote ordeal is interviewing with the cops that's trying to get him to confess to the murder.
Yeah, and that kind of distracted from the overall story. You could have shortened the movie by 15, 20 minutes by removing that, and it would have been more coherent and probably a little bit more involved. But that they kept doing those investigation scenes that kind of broke up the continuity of what was going on, so there was no chance for anything to really build.
Yeah, I don't feel like a story aspect of that works in the found footage documentary. I think you give away your ending right in the opening frames because of that. So, Dwellers, where we land in this on a 0 to 5 with halves allowed on our Rorschach rating. Mark, what would you give this movie?
A painful 1 at best.
You're so kind. I am going to give this a 0.5. One of my lowest, because, man, I checked my watch during this so many times. But, all right, we're going to move on to I Blame Society. I Blame Society basically tells the story of this woman that is been told her entire life that, like, she just can't make it in the film industry, and so after a series of shorts, she latches onto this concept of documenting her transition from filmmaker into murderer. And Brandon, what do you think of this one, man?
So, at first, it took me a minute to really get into this movie, but as it played on, I liked it more. But I really did like the concept of her, like, trying to, like, prove, like, hey, I can do this. I can make you believe that I'm a murderer. Yeah, I love seeing how it played out, and I don't know. It ended up being a really enjoyable film, but I thought that was played out really well. Like, she did pretty good at that, in my opinion. I really enjoyed her performance there.
Mark, how about you, man?
So, yeah, it was enjoyable. It was a little bit predictable from the indie. That's the thing. I've seen so many of these movies in general. A lot of them are predictable for me. So I have to kind of put that disclaimer in there when I keep saying everything's predictable. But for me, it was a little bit predictable. It had it had a cool idea. It had an idea that they explored fairly well, given the limitations of the budget and sticking to found footage. It's a movie that if they took the time and really throwed some budget behind, you could have a really good horror movie. As it stands, it's fun for a watch. It's a cool idea, and they did a good job with her becoming the serial killer. It's just my only big thing was from the very beginning, opening scene. It kind of, yep, this is what's coming. What's going to happen.
This ended up actually being the highlight for me for the very few films I got to watch on this festival, and I agree with you. Like, there are aspects of it that are very generic, very predictable, but I think for me, what really resonated with me was the use of comedy that really helped its voice stand out from the other films that I got to watch on this one. I think that this film, like, it hooked me right away from the opening frames. I would say this movie is clever, and there are genuine times where I felt uncomfortable just from some of the things that was going on. And I feel like this film, though, it has a little bit of uneven tonal issues to where you have the setup in the first act and then kind of the culmination of that setup in the third act, but it just seems like they didn't really care to really flesh out or give any attention to the film's second act. I just really kind of felt like this is where I just kind of really just stopped caring about a lot of these characters and then found myself re-caring about these characters in the third act. I don't know if you guys felt that way about this movie at all.
I kind of felt like there were certain scenes that were drawn out a little bit more than they should have been, which kind of hurt the pacing of the overall movie. And it kind of felt like the main character, they were kind of overdoing just a little bit. It seemed more like high-level high school writing for for the main character at certain points. Like, this is how I think it should be, but I'm a high schooler with little life experience, so that's what I'm going to put down.
Sure, and I can definitely see that, and I can get behind that. I think really what kind of pushed it over for me was some of the social commentary that this film was able to do about how we view women in film and also our obsession with true crime as well. I found this film to be layered in an unexpected way that I kind of found myself really caring about these this lead actress, trying to break into the quote-unquote film industry, and kind of diverting attention or expectations of what she should be because she's a woman. I really thought that was a really interesting way to take this character and kind of navigate her through the world of murders. But I do agree, like, there are a lot of sequences that are just drawn out. I think the first victim that we spend with, we just spend too much time with her, and then it's like every other victim, quote unquote, that we get is just a random like montage that we get, and then there's like this like whole weird subplot that's like introduced in the second scene or the second act where there's a guy that just walks around in his whitey tighties and like is like her like slave guy or whatever. And I was watching this movie with my wife, and like I think it was like the third time that like that guy came on the screen. She's like, "What is the deal with this guy?" And I was like, I don't know. So that was
they
problematic.
never really explained that to my knowledge. He just kind of shows up and he's like her gimp or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
that guy was the star of the movie. I mean, he really was. Because, like, we're not... I mean, yeah, we talked about her performance, but we're sitting here talking about this guy. Obviously, he was the star. He didn't steal
the show.
He did.
Some random dude in his drawers walking around with literally no lines.
Yeah. He's just eating food, watching TV.
Also...
And hauling bodies.
Yeah. Just wait for those bodies to come in.
Less is more.
All right. Well, I blame society on the Rorschach rating scale. What do we give this one? 3 out of 0 to 5. Halves being allowed. I just spoiled mine. Mine has a 3.5. So, Mark, what would you give this one?
Probably a 2.5.
I'd go 3.
All right. So far, I blame society has set the bar. And that bar is not about to be undone by this next one. We're talking about Poser. Mark, how would you describe Poser?
painful. Uh, guy gets out of rehab, goes home, and has to deal with some issues that, yeah, once again, another movie that I've seen too many like, and it was just kind of predictable from the get-go.
I feel like you're not really giving this movie its credit. The whole... All right, I think I can do this a little bit better.
So this movie would make a good cure for insomnia.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, basically like an old guy with, drug rehabilitation comes home to kind of like basically document his recovery process with like old friends and stumbles upon a drug ring. Man, I have to say, like, this movie grabbed me from like the first like opening sequences where we see a guy get shot, and then it just violently tosses you into boredom. And like there are like, Mark, you're not joking, like there are times where like I literally found myself like dozing. I just was like, why is this like still going on? I'd like would like take my mouse and like go over, see how much time was like left on, and I'd be like, what, there's an hour left? Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, it was painful. I kept pulling up the schedule to see the time, what they said the time length was of the movie, and looking back at it, I was like, wow, I am wasting an hour and a half of my life.
Yeah, this is another movie that, much like Dwellers, I felt like had a very high like promise, where like, being that we are a podcast and a nonprofit first, and podcast that specializes in mental health awareness and kind of, really champions stories like recovery. I really was like, man, like I really like want to connect with this character, and they just made him so massively just unlikable, unredeemable. Like there's a scene where like he sells his like, he's like on medication to like cure his like, I guess like,
it was a heroin addiction. He was taking meth, methamphetamine or methadone.
Yeah, to kind of like sway his like addiction and to kind of like eventually kick it, and he sells it. And I was like, man, from that moment on, it's just like, this movie just it never gets interesting. It's so painful to watch. And I wanted so badly to love this film because like I grew up on things like Viva La Bam, Jackass, CKY, like that skateboard culture, and they prominently feature that for like the first like 15 minutes, and then it's just never brought up again.
Yeah, it's they make that indication even before the movie really gets started. The first opening credits is them doing scenes very similar to that whole Jackass time period. And it just kind of falls apart fairly quickly thereafter.
I wrote this in my Letterboxd review for this movie, talking about how it ended up being a slow, boorish movie that I couldn't wait to end. The end, with context, put me to sleep more than its gripping opening. Blah. I mean, this movie is just, it's painful to talk about. Brandon, you caught a little bit of this movie. What'd you think about it, man?
I think this was the one Brandon was looking forward to, too.
It was.
Mm-hmm. It was, because I still love the skateboard culture. Like, that's still something that I hold on to. I just rewatched Viva La Bam like a month ago. And so, like, when it started off with all that, it gave me the CKY video. I remember those videos, CKY?
Yeah.
That they did. Like, that's the vibe it gave off. And I was like, yes. 2 minutes later, no. But my feed cut off because our internet went out. We had an outage in the neighborhood, and it stayed off for like 30 minutes. But what I did see when it came back on, it just, I don't know,
You didn't miss a thing.
It was kind of easy to fill in what was going on. I'm just sitting there watching. I'm like, where's the skateboards? What? This is boring. And I was trying so hard to stay engaged, and I kept just finding myself fidgeting it around. I had my Game Boy sitting by me. I kept flipping it up, wanting to play it. Like, no, I don't need to do this. I'm bored. Help. It was just, I don't know. Like, they had you at the opening, and then it just fell flat. Like, really flat.
So flat. So our Rorschach rating scale, putting Poser through this 0 to 5, halves being allowed. Mark, what would you give this movie?
Oh, God. Probably a half, and that's being generous.
Yeah, I want so badly to like this. Like, I want it so badly to give this movie a 0, but I can't credit, like, the first, like, probably 10 to 15 minutes, like, actually had me engaged. And I was like, all right, I'm about this. And then once he gets home, it's like, I just don't care about these characters anymore. So I'm also going to give it a half as well. This right now stands at my worst film of the year, which I do not say lightly. This movie put me to sleep, and like Mark said, is a absolute cure for insomnia. But speaking of Mark, moving on to a film that only you watched, Mr.
Brandon doesn't get to score it?
Brandon didn't get to watch all of it, so he didn't share in the pain.
He doesn't count? Okay.
Well, I'll give it a half. One. 0.50.
You can join the club. Mark, tell us about 1974.
So 1974 actually ended up being fairly awesome. Looking at the list of movies for this whole thing, there weren't really anything I recognized for the most part. 1974 was coming on. I hadn't heard anything about it. It's a Spanish couple. I'm not sure from what area. And the name of the movie is The Possession of Altair. And Altair is I think it was the wife, the main character. And it's a found footage, what appears, I'll say this much, appears to be a possession movie on top. And you're seeing it through the camera of the significant other. And it is subtitled, which may take away for some people, but as a whole, it did everything right for this style movie. And it was kind of, out of all of the marathon, the film fest that we watched, it was the one that really stood out the most for me.
All right, well, putting 1974 on our Rorschach rating scale, what would you give it?
Solid 4.5.
All right. 1974 is now set the bar for what to live up to as far as the Unnamed Film Festival. Brandon, what is Flower Tapes, a movie that you watched, all about?
So Flower Tapes is about this dude from Florida who just went through a really bad breakup. And so he decided, his therapist decided a good way to get through that was to do like video diaries of his day, kind of just talk to the camera and talk to himself, just really have time with him and with himself. So he went on a trip. He went to this vacation spot where him and his ex always went. And it's basically just him trying to, I guess, find closure and kind of move on. And he stays in the Airbnb on the beach, and that's where things get really weird because the Airbnb people who own it were definitely ready for a good time. That's I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, there was some. It definitely had a weird I'll admit it, I've never actually seen Midsummer, but the way these women, like the little mask with the flowers, just the flower tapes, remind me of Midsummer. I don't know if it had influence from it or not, but yeah. So yeah, just a dude trying to get over his ex, and came into a weird situation.
I really, really am sad that I missed that. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was reading about it before the festival started, and I was like, I might be into that. And it came on, I think, before Posers, I think. And I sat through it, and I actually enjoyed it. I mean, it's my favorite movie of the festival that I watched, for sure. I would definitely recommend seeking it out. It was pretty good.
All right, well, it is now on my Letterboxd watch list, but what would this movie get from you on a Rorschach rating scale?
I would give it a 3.5. I really enjoyed it a lot. So, yeah, 3.5.
All right. Well, this is a movie that was also on Brandon's watch list, and both of you guys got to see this one. This is Charlotte's Nets. Brandon, what's this one about?
Let's have Mark take this one.
So, a douchebag friend and his buddy that are looking up strange videos on the dark web. And I really can't say much more than that because after doing some research, the issue we both had with the movie is we weren't quite sure what was going on because every 2 minutes there was censored for the film fest coming up on the screen, blocking half the screen or portion of the screen or the whole screen. And in talking to the other people watching it, because for the festival it was all virtual and there was a chat box in the corner, what I found out was the version they got for the festival had to be censored for the company that was putting it out to allow it on there. And the censored portions were supposedly real life, like assaults and violence and stuff. And not knowing that, if you just watched the version we got, you don't really know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that was so distracting to me. Like, it's one thing to censor some stuff, I get it, but like they censored everything those dudes were watching, and like the viewer has no idea what's going on. So you're just sitting there like, okay, so it's just two buddies, one's a douchebag, one's not into this, and they're watching dark web videos. Okay,
and
that's
notice
it.
we can't stress douchebag friend enough.
Yeah, we cannot. They cannot.
I don't know why they were friends. I'll put it that way.
Me too. Like I think we've all had that one douchebag friend that's like into the weird stuff on the internet that loves watching. I don't even want to say names of videos that I know about, but just love watching the weird, like Pain Olympics. Like there's people that like watching that kind of stuff, and that's who that guy was. And his friend was not having it. So yeah, it was something. I mean, like there's enough to get the concept of the movie. Like I think the viewer got what was going on, but it really hurt it being so censored because we didn't know what they were watching or seeing. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
You spend the whole time trying to figure out what's he getting upset about. Why is this going on? What's the issue here? Then actually following the movie. But I do know from, like I said, I did a little quick research on it while we were watching it. And supposedly it's supposed to be released later this year. And if it does, it might be worth a rewatch if you can rent it on demand cheap to see if it comes together better, because it seemed like it had a good concept behind it. We just don't know because everything, again, was just censored to make it okay for the festival.
This movie almost sounds like a snuff film.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
It may have been. It may have been.
Because if you have to censor your content because of real life like actions and like assaults, like that is a snuff film, especially if so much of the movie takes place on the quote-unquote dark web. It reminds me so much of the movie what you guys are talking about, 8mm, which was a Nicolas Cage, Joel Schumacher film from '99. That
I know 8mm well.
God, 8mm is probably my favorite Nicolas Cage movie. Basically, Nicolas Cage plays a private detective that gets hired to find a girl or a husband or something, and like stumbles upon like a snuff empire. And that was kind of my introduction to snuff, and that's kind of always been the definition that I've like referred to it as. And I know
he was investigating the authenticity of the snuff film, and it's even got a young Joaquin Phoenix in it.
Yes, it does, with blue hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I gotta add that to my list.
Dude, it's so good. Charlotte's Net definitely sounds like it's that kind of stuff.
It's that kind of. It's almost like, if what I am understanding is correct, it's almost like an extreme version of something like that.
And I know that there's an audience for stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to shame you if you're into that. It's just not my cup of tea. This is definitely going to be one that I'm probably going to pass on when it does get released later on. But Charlotte's Net, Brandon, what is this one going to land for you on our Rorschach rating scale?
I mean, with everything going into the censored everything, I'd probably give it like a 1.5.
And Mark?
It's hard to rate it accurately knowing that we missed half the movie. But if the concept holds up on the initial release, then maybe a 2.
Okay, that's fair. Well, let's get into a movie that this is a pretty interesting story. So I know this because I was emailing back and forth with the curator about this movie. Our next movie up on the docket is Murder, Death, Koreatown, and this was one that the filmmakers made a VHS exclusive copy for this festival and then destroyed it afterwards. So this was a festival exclusive. And Mark, you got a chance to watch this movie. So tell us a little bit about what the movie's about and your thoughts.
Strange murder. It opens up strange. Murder had happened with kind of some weird evidence that a local, I guess, neighbor saw some of this, and it goes into his perspective of him doing what he thinks is an investigation on this whole thing and his paranoia.
And your thoughts?
It's another one that's an interesting concept, but to me failed. It kind of stalled out in tone within about the first 15, maybe 20 minutes, and just kind of leveled off instead of having that constant build to a climax and everything. It ends up being an entire movie of his almost theories. I forgot the term, and I love them, and that's the funny part. But it's him coming up with his crazy theories of what's going on, and this is a sign that this random graffiti on the wall is a sign, and it's meant for me. And he starts reading into everything. It never really builds though. It never really builds to a point where it's like, yeah, this is going to be awesome when the turn finally happens. It was too monotone the whole movie. Oof. The entire movie, and that's kind of what killed it for me.
It sounds like it has a lot on par with like Poser and like Dwellers, where like you have these like really solid openings and like legitimate concepts, and they just never rise to those concepts.
Kind of. It did a little better job. I will say that it does do a little bit better job at kind of progressing everything and keeping you interested, but you're more interested in what's actually going to happen, what's actually going to turn out to be the issues here, and it just nothing ever really happens. It just you're following an almost obsessed crazy person for an hour and a half that nothing really ever happens with.
All right. Well, you were the only one lucky enough to catch this one when it hit the festival. On our Rorschach rating scale, Murder, Death, Koreatown. Where does it land for you?
1.5.
I mean, that's better than Poser. So
yeah, it was more interesting than Poser. It just it fails to really build and give you any sort of real finish to it.
All right. Well, you are still next up on our docket. And the next film on our list is Descent into Madness. Tell us a little bit about this movie, man.
It's a filmmaker has gone to France, and he's documenting his whole trip. I don't know if they said where he's from, but I can tell you it sounds like possibly Middle Eastern from his accent. But it's him, and basically the title tells you what's happening. It's kind of he gets tied up in some stuff, loses some money, gets stuck and stranded, and he kind of goes mad in his situation, going from hotels to living in a tent in a park, and everything just falls apart for him.
Oof, that sounds like a rough watch.
It's actually not.
Oh, okay.
It's so again, this was another one I had to. I asked some questions about to the other people watching, and what I found out is that there's multiple cuts to this movie, and this specific cut that we got to watch wasn't released anymore. I guess they had to contact the company to get this specific cut of the movie for the festival. But it's actually not. It sounds like it's rough it has some rough scenes, and what I mean is kind of like hard to watch because of what's happening, not because nothing's going on or you're confused. It's very clear the entire movie is this is what's happening. He's losing his mind because he doesn't know how to deal with what's going on, and it really does. You watch his descent farther and farther and farther into just losing it and going batshit crazy.
I feel like I would check this movie out just to kind of see like why he loses himself, because like you're being very vague into why he descends into madness. But I like it.
Well, not really, because he's like I said, he gets there to document the film, and various events that happen, he loses pretty much everything and has to live as a homeless person because of the first like half hour what happens in the movie, and then it's just the whole time is him kind of coping with it, and then that final snap and break where he just starts going downhill and losing all sanity. And it's interesting to watch from just about any aspect. It wasn't the takeaway from the whole marathon that we watched for me, but it was interesting and would definitely be worth a check out for somebody.
All right. Well, Rorschach rating scale, Descent into Madness. Where's it landing?
3.5, right in that area.
All right. Well, our last movie that we're going to be talking about is Fake Blood. And once again, this is one that Mark watched. So, Mark, what is Fake Blood about?
Fake Blood is a fake documentary. Two filmmakers and friends are exploring the concept of the idea that violence in movies is affecting culture, basically, as a whole, and making culture violent. And in the process of kind of looking at it, they even talk about that, we've never actually shot guns, so they go to a range and learn about guns and actually shooting guns, and we've never actually been in fights, so they go to like an MMA gym to kind of check it out and actually get into a sparring match and a fight and stuff. And it's an interesting concept, in the beginning because it's like, oh, we're doing our basic research. The thing that really kind of makes it interesting is all these movies bring in consultants for different stuff. And they find out about a consultant for a movie that they hear kind of gave off some weird vibes. And they get a hold of it. And that's where the movie really turns and really picks up. And Fake Blood was actually turned out to be really good. I made it through almost 30 hours of this marathon. Fake Blood was probably my second favorite of the whole thing.
Well, for those of you guys listening right now, if Fake Blood sounds like a concept that you guys would like to check out, it is currently streaming right now for free on Tubi. It is also available to rent on Amazon, Redbox, Vudu, Google Play, and YouTube as well. This is another one that I just added onto my Letterboxd watch list, and hopefully going to be checking it out next week. It sounds really incredible, for lack of a better word.
It's extremely interesting, to say the least. It's kind of interesting the way they did the whole movie, the whole thing.
So Scream's one of my favorite movies, and I'm always really interested about how society interprets things like video game violence or movie violence, and kind of like the psychological implications it has on the viewer and or player. And Fake Blood definitely sounds like it gets down into that social commentary and kind of addresses that in a fun and interesting way.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the comments made in the movie is that they don't think it's made society more violent, but changed the way that these people that are violent do what they do. And they kind of follow that whole mindset the whole movie, and it's really good from start to finish. There really wasn't any boring parts. A scene would start, and there was a couple of them you kind of figured how it was going to go, but the way they played it out, even though you knew it was going to go that way, still kind of kept you engaged and drawn into it, and it was really good from start to finish.
Well, I will throw my hat in the ring. Make sure that you guys follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and after I watch this, after the release of this podcast, I will share my non-spoiler thoughts on Fake Blood. But Mark, putting this through our Rorschach rating scale, where would this land?
Very solid 3.5, low 4.
All right, so our takeaways from the Unnamed Film Festival 2021 are going to be Poser, not Poser. Let's edit that out. Hold on.
Not Poser.
Going to be 1974, Flower Tapes, Fake Blood, and I Blame Society as well. So make sure that you guys let us know if you guys got to see any of these films, if you guys were along for the ride of the Unnamed Film Festival. What did you guys think about it? And we'll provide more information in the in the links below for the film festival as well, and what you guys can expect from future versions of this film festival as well. Anything else that you guys want to add before we get out of here?
So, if you're a fan of found footage and fake documentaries, the mockumentaries or whatever you want to call them, the Unnamed Film Festival, it's actually good. It's pretty much everything you expect from the genre and what you would expect from they say 24 hours, but I believe it hit the 32 hour mark. But it's everything you'd expect, from absolutely cheesy, horrible to a handful of standouts. And it's actually something I'm considering maybe looking up and watching next year.
Well, we might be covering it again next year as well, so this might not be the only time you guys hear about it. We did not cover any of the shorts or talk about any of the shorts. I know that you guys actually had a chance to see some of the shorts. Brandon and I have talked about some of the shorts, as have all three of us throughout the week leading up to the recording of this podcast, that were interesting. Doesn't even begin to scratch some of the things that happened in those movies.
there was one, and I think Brandon saw it too, that was really good. What was the name of it?
The Teaching Jake how to use a camcorder.
Yeah, something like that. Was that the name of it?
Yeah. Teaching Jake how to use a camcorder.
That was a cool concept, and it was really well done. If you can find that short somewhere to see, I'd recommend watching that one. That was really cool the way they did it.
And I want to mention a short. So I was up at like 5 a.m. and I dozed off a little bit. And I woke up and there was a short on called Wet Nurse Trilogy. And all I remember seeing is like this alien in like a nurse hat getting his teeth sucked by another alien. So that's all I remember.
Yeah, there was some weird stuff. And like I said, this whole thing, you're going to get weird. There's a lot of weird. But if you're watching this stuff to begin with, this kind of marathon, you're not normal. And it's probably up your wheelhouse. And that says a lot, because I'd be willing to sit through this 30 hours again next year because of some of the stuff that I watched.
Oh, yeah. If this is your kink, this is the festival for you.
Yes. It is definitely a niche audience.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we just want to encourage you guys that if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please reach out. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. There are 130 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil, and when we look to international numbers, there are 800,000 successful suicides that happen every single year. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So we make this content, while we love talking about weird films, it's not the sole reason we make this content. We make this content so that you listening right now can know and understand that you have value and that you have purpose. And we just want to encourage you guys to go to victimsandvillains.net/hope, where you guys can find our mental health resource library to get you guys the help that you guys need for any of you guys that are struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression right now, all of which you guys can find in the show notes wherever you guys are currently listening to this podcast. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find movie reviews from all three of us. You can find past episodes from our main show, Victims and Villains, our Nicolas Cage podcast, That's High Praise, and much more, all of which you guys can also find our social media as well. But Mark, where can people find you online and all of your painting adventures?
Yeah, right now I'm just on Instagram at Titanium Juggernaut Painting.
And Brandon, Riff Daddy, where can people find you online?
Instagram at The Changing of Times, and Twitter at Brandon W. Miller.
And you guys can find me on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. The cinemas are now closed. Have a good one, guys.